So long ago, old wise man told me if someone can't give you the full picture, the beginning, middle, and end of something, then why are you listening to them? And we're talking about the Bible today, and I'm going to try to explain this Bible from beginning and middle and end so that we can come to a conclusion of why are you here? Why are we all here? What is God's purpose? What is his overarching plan? So stick with me today. I don't know how many series this is going to take, but we're going to start today, beginning in Genesis 1:1, and go all the way through the end of Revelation to find God's eternal purpose of the ages. Are you ready? Let's get started. So in my last video, I talked about some biblical principles, and mostly the majority of that was about human principles and psychological principles that I had found over time in my discussions that I had with John Lilly regarding those subjects. And I did mention that the Old Testament was actually what he was most interested in. And so I thought today that I would try to do something unique. I'm going to try to explain the entire Bible from Alpha to Omega, A to Z, in a reasonable amount of time, so hopefully stick with me to the end. I think this is going to be a perspective that you've never seen before, motivated a lot by some of the YouTubers who I love dearly in some of these subjects, but I think they missed the mark on some stuff. And so hopefully I'll present a unique perspective, starting from before time began to time no more, kind of like what we talked about before. But let's put everything in the middle. And my challenge to you is, an old wise man once told me that unless you can give the picture from A to Z, I mean, do you really see the whole puzzle, or do you get bits and pieces of it? And I think one of the things that keeps people from becoming a true believer is the non-unity among the Christian brethren, specifically the number of denominations. I believe if you Google it, it's something like 40,000 plus. And that just seems, it's hard to wrap your head around how one book that everyone says they believe in, that all talks about supposedly the same thing about Jesus Christ and God and, you know, his history of all the timelines, how could they be so off? And I just kind of want to touch on that just a bit before we get started. The Bible is 66 books, 39 in the Old, right, and 27 in the New. So you got 66 books right there, spent over 4,000 years, written by herdsmen and doctors and fishermen and everything in between. And these books, these 66 books, are looked at by most modern denominations, or even all denominations, as a big buffet. So they will choose a little bit of this for an appetizer out of this book and a little bit of this for the main course and dessert and this, that, and the other, some side dishes. And they'll say, my stamp, I am a Baptist, or I'm an Episcopalian, or I'm a Methodist, or I'm a Church of God, I'm a Church of Christ, I'm a Pentecostal. Ad nauseum, I mean, even among the Baptists, what is their hard shell, free will, Southern, independent? I mean, you could go Foursquare. It just keeps going on and on and on. And so the question is, well, I want nothing but truth. I don't care to be closest to the truth. I had someone from one of these denominations, I asked them, why are you that? And they said, because it's closest to the truth, which is like, it's kind of like that horseshoes and hand grenades thing. I mean, there's no, you're either all in or you're not. So what I'm going to attempt to do here today is start from the beginning, the Alpha and Omega, all the way, the whole story. Let's see how we do it. I have not prepared this. I think that every teacher of the Word of God should be able to do this. So my challenge is to see and ask these questions, spend some time with your pastor, your teacher, your favorite YouTube, ask them to do the same, see what story they present to you, or ask yourself and present it to yourself. Can you throw out the entire Bible in your mind and share it like I hope to share it today? Again, stay with me to the end, because I think a lot of this is going to be a unique perspective that you have never heard before. So with that, let's get started. So I said again, the last one, we started off that before time and space, God was by himself, and God was all and all. And I said this would become very important, because in the end, what we're going to find is that God is going to be God all in all. That's a very different premise. And this leads to the motivation and understanding of why God is doing what he's doing through the purpose of the ages. And by that, I mean time periods. Ages are what in the Hebrew is olams, and in the Greek is epochs, right? Aions. These are just time periods. And if you look, they basically go at 2,000-year periods. From Adam to Abraham is 2,000, right? And then from there to Jesus is 2,000. There's your 4,000. And then we have 2,000 where we're at today. And if you look at God created the earth in 6 days, and the seventh day he rested, that's to be a day of rest. It's a sign for the Sabbath. Sabbath means seven. It's not Sunday. It's the first day of the week. That 1,000 years would be the millennium that you've heard a lot of YouTubers, or that you know as a Christian, that you read in Revelation. So this would be the 7,000 years. So we're going to start back here, and we're going to work our way forward. Let's see how we do. So back here, God is all in all. So here he is with all his glory, all his righteousness, all this light, but he's all alone. And what does he want to do? He wants to share this. So what he does is he creates this spiritual domain, whether you call it the universe, space, and everything that's within it, as in the celestial realm. And we're talking the principalities, powers, mights, and dominions. And when you look at the throne of God, generally what you see is the anointed cherub, which covereth, right? So if we had a cherub with wings, right? We'd have that. We'd have him on his throne here, okay, a throne. And then we'd have the other cherubs over here. One has the face of an ox, one has the face of a man, one has the face of an eagle, and one has the face of a lion. So what's interesting is all animal kingdoms are represented here. And these are also the same faces that we see in the zodiac. You can go down that lane. But the anointed cherub that covereth here is Lucifer. And he's not an angel. He's a cherub. And what's interesting is the word anointed means that he is a high priest. That's what any priest would be anointed at the age of 30, which will come into play later on. So this principalities, powers, mights, and dominions, where you have Lucifer above the throne, and his job was to radiate the outpouring of glory and light. He was a reflection of God's creation. And he had in himself, according to Ezekiel 28, he had vials and tabrets and pipes. I mean, he was a one-man band. I mean, imagine the music, the emanation of music that he's presenting to all of God's creation. And I can see where he was created perfect in wisdom and perfect in beauty, and he had all this. And as God's creation is coming through the spiritual world and coming to worship before God, they're looking at Lucifer going, wow, what a creation. I mean, that's just amazing. And I imagine that he got a little big-headed, right? I mean, do I really need to follow him? I mean, I am the greatest that has ever been created. I mean, how do I even know that you created me, right? I mean, you can go down this lane. But the idea is that he creates this world with all these spiritual beings, right? So the environment that we have here, we talked a little bit about that, is we have these spirit beings that he creates. And of course, we know that at some point, there was a rebellion, and Satan decided that he wanted to ascend to the sides of the north. He wanted to be like the Most High God. He convinces a number of these beings and all the hierarchies. If you look at the hierarchies of the spiritual beings, angels are kind of on the low tier. They're the messengers of God. But as you get higher and higher, the cherub and seraphim one, which is the fiery ones, it's the closer you are to God in the hierarchy, the more powerful you are, the more you'll be able to withstand his glory. So of this hierarchy of beings, a third, well, not necessarily a third, I mean, there is that in Revelation, but there was a lot of these that left God. And the idea is that I don't want to be chained by your rules and regulations. I want to do what I want to do, and I'm not going to do what you want me to do because I feel like a slave, right? And God is saying, but without love and without light, it all leads to your disobedience, and all this sin and all this iniquity will lead to heartache and death. And they took their chances. And was it Linsky in his Rules for Radicals, 10 Rules for Radicals? I'll throw it up here on the board in his foreword. He basically is saying that he's promoting Lucifer by saying that we need to look to the first revolutionary, Satan, Lucifer, who carved out a place for him in the universe. And that's what he did. So when God created the heaven and the earth, in Genesis 1:1, it says, in the beginning, God created the heaven and the earth. And the very next verse, it says, and the earth was without form and void, and darkness was on the face of the deep. God did not create the original creation. So we're going to put one earth down here. God did not create this earth and all that is in this universe without form and void. Those are the Hebrew roots tohu bohu. And Isaiah tells us that God did not create the world tohu bohu. So we know he didn't create it without form and void and darkness. God is light, right? So what's interesting is that we don't know how long it was that this ruinous universe and Earth and all these planets that are ground to dust, how long they sat there. It could have been a trillion years. Could have been a billion years. I know one of the hiccups for people to be a believer in the Bible is that the modern stance of a Christian is to say that the Earth's only 7,000 or 6,000 years old. But that's not true. It could be a billion years old. And when you think about God as an architect, if you're God and you know what the New Jerusalem is made out of, and made of all these precious stones and gold and jewelry and sardis and rubies and diamonds and carbuncle, all these things, you as the great GC, you have the general contractor of the universe. Are you going to use wood if you can use diamonds? Are you going to use, you know what I'm saying? Are you going to use brick if you can use carbuncle and rubies and sardis and emeralds? It is my personal belief, and this is kind of outside the scope, and this is me going on a limb. I believe that as God is the architect, he did all this. He created planets, stones of fire that were radiating all these wonderful energies off of these rubies and diamonds and so forth. Even NASA, not that I'm a big believer in NASA, but scientists have found planets, whole planets that are diamonds. So you have to think, did God create all this dust and this radiation of death? No. It is my contention that he created all of these planets as gold, rubies, diamonds, emeralds, whatever it was the best material you could make. And then what happened when Satan, Lucifer, fell and took his spiritual beings with him to no longer be what he thought was a slave, he was cast out from God as profane. And God took his perfect creation and there's a huge earthquake, and this whole world, this whole universe just became flooded by water. Just water. And you think about water and pressures. I mean, think about the ocean. We're just talking just like a mile or so down, and you're talking atmospheric pressures that would grind things to dust. Imagine a whole universe. It would take these things and grind them to dust. And so one of the unique things about the story of the Bible is that God says that he's going to take the greatest creation he's ever had, and he says he's going to create a fire within him, and he's going to turn him into ashes, and the kings of the earth shall walk upon his ashes and his dust. And as we'll learn here shortly, he takes Adam and makes him out of dust of the ground, breathes in his nostrils the breath of life, man became a living soul. It's this inversion, right? So it's Satan is going from the highest to the lowest, and he's creating from the lowest, and he's taking it to the highest, because he's going to replace, right? There has to be balance in the universe, the whole homeostasis thing we talked about. God's got it all figured out. So what's unique about this calamity that happened back then, say whenever a person tries to usurp the authority of a high priest, there's always an earthquake. We'll go over that more, but when Jesus Christ was crucified, there was a great, all the rocks were rent, and there was a great earthquake. My contention too, all those stones, like the gems and diamonds, They were all cracked at that point. When the Son of God died, it cracked all of them. That's what, when people take their loop and they're looking at the diamonds, they're looking for the cracks, they're looking for inclusions. At one point, the high priest had all these 12 stones on them, like a computer on their chest. And those were all perfect at one point, in my contention. But let's get back. So we have all these spirit beings, and there is a rebellion. Okay? And the universe and all the earth is flooded by water. We'll just put H2O. And this is the first earth that Peter, I believe, talks about that perished by water. So we have one earth here. Now God comes and he created all this. But then the word that he uses in Genesis when he talks about let there be light and let the waters divide from the waters, and let the earth and the plants and the stars and the moon and all that stuff. It's the word for make. And you don't create a mistake. A mistake is made. So he didn't create a mistake. He created perfection. The mistake was made by Lucifer and these beings. And God took this mistake after 1 billion years, 1 trillion years. I don't know. Nobody knows. But it certainly was probably more than 6,000 years. I doubt this happened in a split second. But as we go forward, we realize that he forms man of the dust of the earth, and we talked about this last video, that God breathes into the nostrils the breath of life, the ruach, and man became a living soul. I want you to notice that man was not, he wasn't given a soul. He became a soul. So the flesh that we talk about here, the worm food, the carbon unit, whatever you want to call this thing of flesh, was made. Adam means red's dirt. He forms Adam out of the dust, right? And he breathes into his nostrils the breath of life, and he gets animated. And that's what soul is. You do not have a soul, a singular soul. You are soul. I hope you see the distinction, because modern Christianity has led people astray by the idea that this soul they think they have is immortal. God only hath immortality, dwelling in light where no man can approach, the Bible says. Well, if God only has immortality, why would we think we have immortality? And isn't that the first lie that Satan told Eve? You shall not surely die, right? At least not that day. So man becomes a soul. He becomes alive. And you know this, when you see people, you walk in a room, some people have more soul than others. There was the show Soul Train. It's how it's how you vibe. It's how you animate this flesh with this spirit. Everyone has been given this spirit. We all have this flesh, but how do you animate it? What kind of soul do you have, man? We all vibe in on people. We all have this little meter. I call it a BS meter. It's like that weather vane on top of a house. I mean, we test the spirits, man. We see, what you're telling me. Is it BS? I'm hoping that you're doing that with me. I hope that you are listening to these words and you're using your BS meter and saying, well, is this guy telling me the truth or not? So we're trying to lay a foundation here that before Adam and Eve, before God recreated the earth, remade it, I should say, there was a long time before here. And we don't have all that evidence. It's not for us to know. But to help answer the question, the earth is a lot older than that. So Adam and Eve, they go to the tree of life, right? And you know the story. Some people call it, an apple. I mean, even Apple has the logo, the bite. I mean, there's something interesting. You can marinate on that. But if you look at the scripture, there's basically 3 ways to look at that fruit. One way is a lot of people believe the fruit was a grape of some sort, because the first miracle that Moses ever did was turning water into blood. And the first miracle that Jesus did was turning water into wine. And they say that's a reference, kind of like an allusion to the law of firsts, the first mentions in the Bible, that Adam and Eve had a circulatory system of water, which made them like translucent, a kind of a celestial being. He was a son of God. So the idea follows that they ate of this fruit, an actual fruit, and their circulatory system became blood instead of water. The flesh tones that we have now, they saw their genitalia, they realized they were ashamed, and that's one way of looking at it. The other course is that it was an actual apple, which of course there's no apple in Genesis at all. But I would throw this out there, and I'll let you marinate with this. The lineage, the tree of a family, right? The family tree of lineage. There is the fruit of the womb, right? There is when a woman has a baby, that's the fruit of her womb. It is my contention and my belief that it's pretty clear that what transpired was not a fruit like we're talking eating fruit. I'm talking something sexual. Because in justice, the punishment must fit the crime. And what was the punishment for Eve? But in childbearing, right? It will be painful. Well, that's the nether region there. What was the thing they were ashamed of? The nether region. And what was her, that Adam would be the head of her at that point, which means that she wouldn't have a lust or want for any other than her husband. So all of those punishments lead to something sexual in nature. But if that isn't enough for you, the tree of life being the lineage of a seed line that may or may not be of this world, the wheat and the tares is what I'm thinking here. If you're a Christian, you know what I'm talking about. Separate the wheat from the tares. They look the same, they act the same, but you'll see by their fruits they're different. Cain, who is of that wicked one, right? I mean, there's that. You of your father the devil. There's that. But the one I want you to marinate on is when Paul says to the Corinthians, "For I have espoused you as one chaste virgin unto Christ. But I am jealous with a godly jealousy, for as the devil beguiled Eve, so he should beguile you." So that verse, and I'll throw it up here. I mean, the context is virginity, right? And he's saying that she was seduced. He's afraid that they would be seduced. And so it has a sexual connotation to that. So I let that marinate to say that there may be two seed lines on this earth. It's just something to think about. But the punishment for Satan was that he would crawl on the belly, on the dust that he would eat for the rest of his life, and that Eve, let's say this was Eve, that through her seed would come his destroyer, that her seed would produce an heir that would punish and his head, and he would the Satan would be able to hit the heel of her heir. So a woman does not have seed. Okay, she has an egg. So this is the first mention really of a virgin birth. But at this point, Satan in Genesis realizes that his enemy will come from the woman, right? The womb. So what does he do? A smart guy, whether he told them why he was doing this or requested him to do this, there is the famous story of Mount Hermon and the angels that come upon the Mount Hermon. They all descend, and this is like when you see, that Paramount Pictures and all the stars coming in, and they just, the star is a head, two hands, and two legs. It's an icon of a human or an angel. So these angels fly in, they hit the water, and they go on top of Paramount, the beginning of all those movies. That's really what that's about. And because these elites have worshipped these people, this golden age we hear talk about is when the gods ruled on the earth. And they came down, and in Genesis 6 that they saw the daughters of men, that they were fair, and they took for them wives for all that they wanted. And they made a pact, according to the book of Enoch, that they would do this. And when they realized they had done wrong, they asked Enoch to intercede for them. And Enoch came back and said, "You are in big trouble. You crossed the boundary. You hybridized, God's race. And for that, you'll go to a special place and be bound until the end times under the river Euphrates," or whatever. It's all called, there's Sheol in the Old Testament, which is the Hebrew word for grave, right? And there is Gehenna, which is the Greek word for hell, but that is really the garbage dump we'll talk about in the future. And there's Tartarus, and God sent them to Tartarus, which is a separate place just made for them. It's a prison for the spirits that came down and mated with women. But in this mating of women, this trying to destroy the seed, to destroy the heir, you'll find in the Bible that Satan gets so close. He gets so close. In fact, in the Gospel of the Stars, I'll show you. I'll put it up here. There's a famous series of stars that show Christ holding on to the serpent, and there's the crown, and his tongue is like it's right there. He's right there. He almost has it. I mean, it's like that commercial with the guy with the doll. He almost had it. But there are times in the Bible, there's like one child left that has the seed line where Jesus Christ can come from, and he's hidden off into, with the priests. But it becomes so close. It was down to 8 people. So the whole world had been hybridized by these giants, and it came down to Noah and his family. And Noah was perfect in his generations. And what that means is that his generations could go all the way back, and no one had been infiltrated sexually by these angels. And so God says, "Hey, man, you chose Noah to build an ark." And the story is quite amazing. I don't really think people let this marinate, but God comes down to a man and says, "Hey, I need you to build a boat. And I need you to be this big. It's going to be this ark," and yada, yada, yada. And he doesn't even talk to him for like 120 years or something. I mean, I think your wife would be, maybe even after 2 weeks, let alone 20 years or 100 years. Like, dude, what are you doing? Have you heard from him again? I mean, do you need to throw the fleece out and get some, let them talk to you again? Are you sure that you heard what you heard? I mean, because we're into this project. We're 110 years into this project, and we haven't gone on vacation. You know what I'm saying? I mean, I'm sure it got real. But Noah is in the faith chapter because he heard what God told him to do. He knew it was God, and he built the ark exactly like it was supposed to be built. And the story. He gets in the ark, and God closes the door because it's too big. And then it rains for 40 days and 40 nights, and he floods the earth, right? And then there's the covenant that God makes with the earth. He'll never do that again, and that's the rainbow. We could go into why it's a bow, right? I mean, if you think about glass and water and ice and all that, another time. But so after Genesis 6, right, we see that all of the earth had been destroyed. All of these evil angels, the hybridization, were destroyed. And because the hybridization of these beings were half angel, half man, they didn't die like a man. That's where we get demons from. For those of you who are not up to speed or familiar with that, when we talk about actual demons, that's where demons come from, out of disembodied spirits. Their bodies were drowned, and they are a spirit that is searching for a body. Jesus talks about that, to make sure when you sweep your house clean that you keep up with it. Otherwise, that spirit's going to come back and invite more of his friends. So after Genesis 6, what do we have? We have Noah goes up into the mountain, Mount Ararat, which is, by the way, where the first vineyard in the world was ever set. And you can actually see on YouTube, there's a guy that, if you look at the Armenians, you look at the history back there, they've protected Noah's Ark for years, but there was an issue with Turkey, and you can go down the road. Maybe I'll put the links in here where you can actually physically see Noah's Ark. They found it. It's just being suppressed. But while he's on the ark, there's something I failed to mention in the beginning that is key to this whole story, and that is that this earth right here is a kingdom. It is when God created Adam, he gave him dominion over all the animals. And dominion means kingship. So let's say this was Adam, he was given the crown, right? He was given the crown, he was the king over the earth. Well, he lost the crown. And think about the deed of the earth. Think of this as a deed of the earth. When you look at Revelation, the scroll, who is worthy to open the scroll? Think of that as the deed to the earth. Who has right to rule the earth? He lost the crown to Satan, and Satan took it legally because he was not worthy to hold the crown. What's very interesting is that this kingship goes back to Satan, but then after God resets the earth with Noah, and he's on Mount Ararat, right? And here's Noah up here with his three sons, and it would be Shem, Ham, and Japheth. He's on the mountain up there. He resets it. He gives Noah dominion. Right? He gives him dominion. Which means that God gave Noah kingship. But then what happened? Noah goes to make grape juice. It sits in his firkins. And it ferments and turns the wine because there was no solar radiation that was hitting the earth before the flood. The windows of heaven opened up, and it was like a greenhouse. I mean, it was a perfect temperature. There was no rain. All the water came up from the earth from like springs. And so he didn't know any better, and he creates his vineyard. He goes to drink the wine, or the grape juice, and it's wine, and he gets drunk. And Ham did something to Noah. It's actually what he did was to Noah's wife. And the baby that was born from that had a lineage of Nimrod. And we know that when Noah found out what Ham had done to him, he cursed Ham. And of course, Nimrod came from Ham. And Nimrod hated God because he knew that God had cursed his family. So he wanted to fight God, literally. And so he built a ziggurat, right? Built the ziggurat. And, people talk about a ziggurat being, trying to get above the floodwaters and, getting high up into heaven because it was so high. And I don't believe that any of that's true. I believe when you do your research and you find what the ziggurat was, is you do some research and you find that Nimrod found some tablets. He found some old world ancient technology because Nimrod actually became a hybrid. And that's never happened before. It's kind of like when you're watching the movie, what was it, 300, and the Spartans, and the king, Persian king, goes into a cave, and we've talked about that before, and he goes in the water and he comes out a golden god. That's kind of representative of Nimrod.
You will be a god king. And in that darkness, he surrendered himself completely to power so evil and perverse. But as he emerged, no part of a human man that was Xerxes survived. His eyes blazed like scarlet coals. He was stripped, cleansed, glabrous and smooth. Xerxes was reborn a god.
Something happened with Nimrod where he became a Nibirim. He became a hybrid. He became a half god, half man. Actually, it was a 2/3 God, 1/3 man. And when you think about that, that's 33. And where do we know 33 from? Famous club, that we all talk about all the time on YouTube. But what was this ziggurat? What was he trying to do? What I believe, when you read the research, what they would do is they'd put a hut up here, and they'd put a big bed, and they would send their elite daughters up to the top of this ziggurat in hopes of, like Mount Hermon, the angels would come down and get with these women that were placed up there and start the golden age again. They wanted to bring back the gods. They wanted to bring back how they ruled the earth. They wanted to bring it back the way it was. This golden age goes all the way back. I mean, you look at the rings, the 5 rings in the Olympics. That's another thing, but there's a lot to there. And of course, we have a certain president who's talking about the golden age again, which is kind of scary, actually. So Nimrod wanted to start this all over again, and he started the first world government. And so what happened is he was gathering the whole world into himself, and God said, we can't let this happen because nothing will be, once they get into all this again, because he made a promise. He wasn't going to flood the earth again. He had the rainbow. So he decided to separate all these people by separating them by language and confusing their tongues. And so this went on for a while. And the world is doing its thing. And we read in Romans that Paul says God gave the world up and over to a corrupt mind, for they're worshiping beetles and snakes and rocks and, all these statues. And so after 2,000 years of this nonsense from Adam, God calls one man out of the Ur of the Chaldees named Abram. And Abram, he says, get thee out of thy country in a place where I'll show you thereafter. He calls that Abram. And he says, get thee to a country which I will show thee. And he says, I will give you the promised land. And as he's going to the promised land, of course, we read that Sarah was 90-some years old, and the Lord comes and sups with Abraham, and the Lord hears Sarah laughing because the Lord is telling Abraham that he will indeed have a son, and through his son will come, right, from Eve, this whole seed line, will come the Messiah, will come the King of Kings and Lord of Lords, who will rule and reign over the earth as the King of Kings. When he hears her laughing, he says, Sarah, come out. He says, you will indeed have a baby. It'll be a miracle. And of course, you know the story that she says, go into Hagar, or her maidservant, and there's a child that's born, Ishmael, which is where the Muslim families of the world come from. That's why they believe that Abraham is their father as well. And then indeed, in her old age, Sarah has a son, Isaac, right? And then we have the fathers of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, right? That's the promises of the father that we hear about in the New Testament. So let's talk about the next phase that we have here, Abraham. So that was the first 2,000 years. We go from Adam, right? And now we're starting with Abe, old Abe. And we have 2 failures for the king. We have Adam, lost the crown, and we have Noah, lost the crown. And we know to this day, Satan still has the kingdoms because he offered them to Jesus. He says, if you but bow down and worship me, he says, all these kingdoms I will give to you if you just but worship. Jesus never denied that Satan was the key holder of the earth, that he was the king. He's the prince of the power of the air, right? He is the prince of the earth right now. He holds the deed to this earth. He never questioned that. He just knows that in time it will be Christ again. So we went through 2,000 years, and the hybridization is over. We have Noah, Shem, Ham, and Japheth, and we learn in Genesis chapter 10 of 70 nations, right? 70 nations. And in these 70 nations, we find out from Paul that God was done with these. We were called Gentiles. Okay, let's do this. This is so important for you to understand that Gentiles are different from what we're about to talk about. These 70 nations were worshiping beetles and snakes and rocks and temples and statues. And God said, that's it, I'm done. So he calls Abraham out of the Ur of the Chaldees, and he tells him that out of thee shall come a great nation. From your seed shall come a great nation, and it will rule the earth, and it will teach the earth. And we find out that this is going to be a royal nation above all the others, and they're going to be a royal priesthood. And that's very important. So in and I really believe that was Michael Heiser, that really brought this out. I believe it's Deuteronomy 8:32. I'll put it up here. Whenever you look at the nations, these 70 nations, what you find is that there is a principality that rules over these nations. And we find that in Daniel. There's the Prince of Greece, right? Prince of Persia. This is my personal belief that heads of state for centuries are in touch, or at least their priesthood or their advisors are in touch with these principalities. I think today the modern heads of states are nothing more than puppets, and the real rulers are behind them. But back then, and we're talking about Nebuchadnezzar and all these others, Nimrod and so forth, I believe that they were in personal contact. There's a great book called Morning in the Magicians, and it talks a little bit about that with a person from the 30s and 40s that tried to rule the world over there in Germany. A very interesting book. But what Heiser brings out is that he basically says that you principalities and that are ruling these 70 nations, he says, you can have them, right? You can have all these 7 nations. They're yours. I'm done with them, but I'm going to create my own, right? And this nation is going to be Israel. And Israel is going to be mine inheritance, and you, hands off, you can't touch them. And so Abraham's called out, and he realizes that Abraham is no better than Noah, no better than Adam. He can't put trust in him. He tells him that through his seed, it'll be the sand of the sea and the stars of heaven, which tells you that his seed, there's celestial seed, right? Stars of heaven, and there's terrestrial seed, dust of the earth and the sand of the sea. So Israel, which comes from Abraham, right? Abraham if there's one thing that you get from this talk here, is what I'm about to tell you. This is the key. I put together a video, the 3 families of God, and I speak at the end, the key that will unlock all the doors for your Bible. What I'm about to tell you is the key that will unlock everything for the Bible. If you do not know what I'm about to share with you, you will not understand the Bible. What I'm talking about is the everlasting covenant that God makes with Abraham. God realized that Adam failed, Noah failed, that Abraham's no better. So he had Abraham, so I'm going to make, a promise to you. He said, what he did is he made a promise with himself, because God cannot lie. He had Abraham take a cow, cut it in half, right? The covenant is a cut. So just like, in old times, they would, cut their hands, 2 men would shake and they'd form a blood covenant. John Wick talks about that covenant with I'm sure you've seen it. Same idea. But with God, that covenant was a cow split in half, and we're told in Scripture that God put Abraham to sleep. And God, as a fire, went through the covenant and formed this promise with Abram, but he formed it with himself in behalf of Abraham, because Abraham is a man and would fail like the others. So this is the everlasting covenant, a binding covenant that God made with Abraham and himself that will not go away. And what is this covenant? And this is so important.